let's do it. Hey everyone, what's up? Thanks for coming. I'm Walt. I'm one of the founding members of the LESCSS along with these other guys, which is also the Lower East Side Cactus and Succulent Society. We're a club and we're a nonprofit organization, and we started kind of just as like a small group of creatives who all loved cactus and succulents. And, we wanted to kind of share knowledge and tips and, passion with each other. And also with like-minded individuals, not just like a bunch of professors or something. We have kind of a shared interest for plants that I think are not that common in cultivation, as you'll see here. And, since we started, we've kind of broadened into a larger community-based group, which obviously still has a very large focus in plants, but also with the arts, environmentalism, and social justice reform. We really are trying to focus on community ties, I would say, between with each other and also, our greater community. Today is the first of 3 lectures that is hosted by the LESCSS in collaboration with Dover Street Market. We'd like to thank Dover Street for their support here. They've been really amazing. We also actually have 3 shirts available as a part of this collaboration as well, including a cool collab with Online Ceramics. These are available online and in store at Dover Street, New York. And then we also have a bunch of hand-selected plants, very cool stuff. And those are in-store only at Dover Street Market, New York. So maybe if after this you're kind of inspired to pick up a new desert dwelling friend, then you should definitely head on over to Dover Street Market and pick one up. Because all of the profits for both of these things will go to our community center project, which is going to be a nonprofit physical space in the Lower East Side. It's going to house our plant collection as well as be an alternative learning space. So if you enjoy this or any other of our programming, we'd really appreciate any contributions. You can learn more about the Community Center project at thecenter.lescss.org. Maybe we can put that link in the chat for everyone.
Yeah, add that.
Awesome. Also, guys, remember, so you're right now in the first lecture of 3. It's going to be the next 2 Saturdays. Next week, we have a really cool lecture about the Welwitschia mirabilis, which is my favorite plant, probably. It's going to be super funky. And the weekend after that, we have an amazing lecture by Zach and Parker, who are in this one right now, founding LESCSS members, and they're going to be talking about an amazing trip they took. So you guys should register for those as well. The links are on the Dover Street site, and I think you can get them on the Eventbrite as well.
Also, really quick, Walt, we will be having a club meeting on the 31st, and that info will be available on our IG. So if you're interested, stay posted to that, because we will be sharing that meeting and the programming for it as well, along with a Cal invite for it.
Yeah. We're usually, as of now, our meetings have always been kind of closed within our community, and I guess we're starting to make it a little bit bigger, so that's cool. We'd love if you joined. So about today, first off, I'd just like to ask everyone in Zoom, it's best for this presentation if you put on the gallery, speaker view, not gallery view, because speaker view will allow you to see the screen or, the webcam of the speaker, and there's going to be some cool plants shown today, so you're going to want to be able to see that in its full form. Just to get us started though, so cacti, as you guys might or might not know, come from all across the Americas, or the New World as they say, and in evolutionary terms they're relatively new. The succulents we collect are mainly from South Africa and Madagascar, or the Old World. And you can find them globally, though, in certain cases. I think that everything we say today is going to be kind of about our experience growing plants. And, it definitely can be used as a guide, and these tips can definitely be used for your own experience. But, you know, part of the fun in all of this and also part of the challenge is kind of finding what works for you and what you prefer, and, you know, kind of building your own world there. So, you know, this can kind of be a jumping off point. I'm Walt, as I said before, or Walter, I guess, in professional terms. With me, we have Joe, Zach, Parker, Marco, and John, who are also founding LESCSS members. And we're going to kind of run through just some basics of, you know, growing, looking after, and generally loving desert dwelling plants. If you have any questions at any point throughout the lecture, you can type them in the Q&A box. I think that if it feels right, maybe the speaker can answer them as they go on. And if not, we're going to do a Q&A session at the end. If you'd like to wait until the end, that's fine too, because that can give us a chance to kind of unmute you guys and it can be a bit more of a conversation. Yeah, so I think, you know, for me, that's kind of it. I'll pop back in at the end. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Zach, and he's going to kick us off here.
No, I'm going to start.
Oh, you're starting, dude? Sorry, that was a big mess up. You're doing water?
Water's first, right?
Yeah, water first. Sorry, Joe.
Yes.
This is Joe.
It's all good. Hi, everyone. Hold on. Let me figure out how to do this. Thank you, obviously, for attending. This is really cool that we got to do this. And we're obviously really excited to be opening up our club a bit more to other people who are in the Northeast, really anywhere, but like the main goal with the club for all of us was sharing tips about our very specific sort of growing environment here in New York City and the Northeast in general. And I think a lot of that came out of trying to learn how to do this stuff online, where most of the guides and the literature that exists online is really geared towards people who already are living in arid climates where these plants, you know, could basically survive on their own outside. So we're really specializing in indoor growing, and indoor growing and growing under lights, and really trying to recreate habitat as much as we possibly can in a really obviously different environment than where most of these plants are typically found. So I'm going to start today just by talking about best practices that I found with my own collection and my own practice with watering plants, and how to do that, and different methods for doing that, when to do it, blah, 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 all that stuff. And obviously, as we go through it, feel free to hit us with any questions, and I can either answer as I'm going, or we'll get back to it in the Q&A section. So I just want to start basically by saying that obviously all these plants that we're growing, cacti and succulents and other sort of weirdly exotic plants that some of us have in our collections, I feel like there's a common misconception that these plants don't really need water, which, you know, in relation to other house plants is somewhat true. But I think what I found over the course of collecting is that for these plants to really grow and be happy, you need to be really actively watering them throughout the year, but with seasonal differences. And the other big thing that comes up with water here is that cacti and succulents, as a sort of umbrella term, covers a really wide range of differing watering needs, with like some plants really being very, very sensitive to watering, and others needing much more water than you would probably expect from a cactus or succulent. And in my collection, I feel like I have a pretty wide range of stuff I've found that has really differing watering needs over the course of the year. And the other thing, I think, before I switch on and start showing you guys some of the plants and some of the methods to think about when you are considering water for your plants, is that, and this is something that Zach brought up yesterday, is that I don't think we should conceive of water as something that, you know, basically is coming out of the faucet and existing, that the plants are only getting it from us through the watering can, but this is something that exists atmospherically. And in some ways, that's one of the biggest differences about growing in the Northeast, is that we live in a way more humid environment than any of these plants really exist in, with the exception of some, maybe. Yeah, so, and I guess with that, I can sort of switch over. Let me figure out how to start my video.
Joe, I'm gonna hand you off, all right?
Okay. Is my video going?
Oh, you're good.
Which way is it facing? I can't see.
Facing you.
There I
Yeah.
am. Oh, hi. Okay. So yeah, this is my little collection here. And it's sort of, I mean, we'll touch upon lighting and pests and all the other things that and soil that can be an issue when growing these plants indoors. And as you can see, I mean, I have everything in a north facing window because that's just the only window I have. And everything is supplemented with a lot of light, and the amount of light that you're getting is also going to really determine how much water you're going to be using for your plants. So just to start, I wanted to show you, these are some of the plants that I pulled from my collection. I got this little Conophytum upcordellum, some lithops whose species I'm not exactly sure of because I don't know. A buophony, this little elephantiapes, Dioscorea elephantiapes, and a Pachypodium bispinosum. And I wanted to pull these just as differing examples of things that need water at different times. And so one thing that I think I'd like to start with is just one of the biggest differences that you'll find in your collection is that there are some plants that are actually winter growers rather than summer growers, whereas the cacti, like all of these guys, they are basically wanting water only really in the summer. That's when they're going to be actively growing. And so water the rest of the year is going to be much more sparing, and it's only going to be used to keep their root systems alive. So these plants are basically dormant right now. And if you were to water them now as much as you should in the summer, it would likely induce rotting in some of them. Whereas some of these plants, specifically this Dioscorea that's now in vine, which is telling me that it is actively growing, and these Conophytum, those are winter growing plants. So I know now, and a lot of this information is readily available online. If you know the species of your plant, you can look it up and determine whether it's a winter or summer grower. But for me, these are the plants that I know are going to need more attention right now as we enter the winter months. And one thing that's interesting too, specifically about like the Conophytum, and I don't know if it's catching that in focus. This is a plant that grows in very similar regions as these lithops, but the Conophytum is a winter grower, whereas the lithops are, summer growers. And so I don't know if you can see. Can you guys tell me if this is focusing at all on the plant?
I'd move it back a little bit, but
Move it back. You probably can't see it really because it's not focusing that much, but I can tell right now, just looking at the plant, that it needs water, just because there's all these tiny striations on the body. It just looks actually wrinkled and shriveled. So that is something that I'm going to water today. And whereas these lithop plants, now that they've entered their dormancy, they're actually actively growing right now, but they don't want any water. And these are very specific plants where the leaf pairs will grow through the winter, and they are going to absorb all the moisture that you gave them through from the summer through that old leaf pair. So I just wanted to show this as an example of how, like, obviously similar these plants could look, but be on very different watering schedules. And then these other guys like the Dioscorea and the Buophony and our little Pachypodium here, I want to just demonstrate sort of techniques that I think all of us here use as ways to determine when they do actually need water. So I use this little, I don't know what you'd call it. Barbecue stick, a bamboo skewer. You can use chopsticks, but basically I'll put them in the soil like that. And you can allow it to sit there for a few minutes. I can definitely tell just by the way it's moving through the soil that this is completely bone dry. And so I'll know that it actually needs water right now. And just, I guess I need to move pretty quickly because it's already 4:20, but just to cover some sort of different methods of watering. Well, first of all, let me talk about water in New York City. And I don't know if everyone in attendance is living. Hi, Ian, I see your, I'll get that question after. Oh, and hi, Orlando. But water in New York City is a little bit on the pH is around 7.5, just the regular tap water. And a lot of these plants just in habitat are going to get a lot water that's a little bit more, is it acidic or basic? Because it's the pH is around 5.
Acidic.
Any of the, it's
Acidic.
It's acidic, yeah, right? And so what I've found and what I've actually noticed being like having a real benefit with my plants is adding some of this, you don't need to use Goya, but some distilled white vinegar. And you want to just lower the pH of the water to around between 5 or 6, because that's mimicking the acidity of the plant's natural, like, you know, the water they're getting in habitat. I use this little pH meter. That's like how I initially determined how much of the vinegar to add to my watering can on each watering. And I can add this into our chat, just like a link to this. It's just a shitty little one, but it does the trick. But I found that that's been a really helpful little tip. And I hope that if no one has heard that, they're willing to try that. And just to get things along, I'll show you just different versions of watering techniques that you could use. So I'll show you, I'm going to be watering this little Dioscorea. So basically what I do, there's different watering methods, right? Like you could do the pour over the top method where you're actually watering on the soil. But what I do and why I have it in this little container is generally, if it's plants that I know that are growing that are going to need a lot of water, I'll sit them in here and keep them basically in this tray until you see that the water's actually like seeping out of the bottom. I just water it until the water has completely soaked through. And if it's something like a Dioscorea or in the summer for my cacti and other things that are actively growing, I'll sort of sit them in this tray and allow them to really soak up the water and completely basically drench the soil. And that's usually, you know, what you want to do when plants are actively growing. And it's what I'm going to do to this Buophony that's looking a little sad because it needs some water. Same with this Pachypodium. But whereas with other things in the winter, like all of these cacti, what I've found is generally that, and this is sort of running against what a lot of things say online, where you do want to give your plants a basic period of dormancy where they're getting much less water than the summer. But because atmospherically it's so dry in New York City apartments in the winter, these I find need a little bit more water than is generally suggested online. So what I'll do is basically just like give them small sips, just about like that much, where I'm getting the topsoil wet and it's getting a lot of those smaller roots slightly moist, not so much to like feed them and encourage growth, but to prevent those roots from fully drying out. And generally I'll go through my collection and sort of, I know them now, what the water needs are for each. And I think that is something that generally will only come with time as you continue collecting and growing. But it's a year-long thing, and knowing the seasonal needs and the differing needs, I think, of all your different plants is going to be very important. And I think I went well over my allotted time, and yeah, sorry. So I guess I will just end it there. And I know I probably didn't cover as much as I was hoping to. And if you have any other questions about watering or anything, please just ask in the Q&A.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, everyone. All right, now it's on to, what are we moving on to?
Lighting.
So similar to Joe, before I jump into lighting, I also like do a little water on the more mature plants that I have in my collection. I found that using like these little like spray bottle things, you can really direct like where the water is going and like quickly go around the edge of your planter instead of using like my regular watering can, because sometimes the water can shoot out really quick and overflow. So moving on to lighting, I'm going to show you my collection super quick so you have a better idea of like what I'm talking about and what I'm recommending. So I'm going to switch the camera over to this. Okay, so this is a southwest facing window.
Wait, I think somebody needs to switch over his camera.
Yeah, we'll start this. There you go.
So this is a southwest window. And these are cob grow lights. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. And then this is a west facing window, again, a cob grow light. And then this is like my little seedling station with some other plants growing here. And these are T5 lights. So they're all full spectrum. And we'll talk about light temperature in a second. So let me just switch back.
We got you, you're back.
Cool. I'm just going to switch my camera back so I can get my two monitors set up. Okay, so lighting, right? We would all prefer that the sun is taking care of all of this, but especially living in New York and other cities, this is something that more often than not is impossible. So we'll talk about windows first really quickly so people can have an understanding of like the base amount of light that their plants are getting. And then if you choose to go supplemental with T5s, cobs, or other types, which is what I would recommend, especially for cactus and most succulents, you can base the amount that you need and the power that you need from those. So south facing windows are obviously the best to receive the most sunlight during the day. So what that means for your plants is they're getting the most natural sunlight throughout the day. More often than not, you'll need a little supplemental if you have plants that are growing in very sunny deserts, which is why I have these cobs, but also because I have this built-in air conditioner and it blocks quite a bit of light. So that helps to fill the void of light that I don't receive. If you have pretty much any other direction facing windows, but especially eastern and northern, you're going to need to supplement if you want your plants to grow healthy and if you want them to look like they do in habitat. And that's pretty much what everyone in this group wants. We want our plants to look as close to habitat as possible because that's the reason why we fell in love with them, how they grow in habitat. So if you have western facing windows, that'll get a little more light throughout the day than eastern and definitely the northern. But again, you'll probably need some supplemental light. And if anybody has like specific questions of what that is or anything, you can hit us up in the chat or DM us once you check the direction of your windows and everything in the days that follow. So supplemental lighting, like I showed you, these are cobs, and then the bigger guys are T5s. That just refers to like the technology being used to create light. This is, so what cob means, it refers to how the LEDs attach to the panel. So there's no space, which makes it much more dense, and it creates a higher output of light. And the T5s are fluorescent. Those are going, that type of technology was much more common in the past, but as LED technology furthers itself, people are leaning more towards that because of the output and the energy efficiency. So something else to take into consideration is like the Kelvin value of the light. So when you read something like 3000 K, 4000 K, that's what that's referring to. A really good middle ground is 3500. So that will help your plants to grow more similar to habitat. And if you're using like a 3000 K or lower, that'll help with flowering, and 4000 K and higher will produce more like vegetative growth, or it'll show you your plant getting bigger. And so my T5s are a higher value Kelvin. So that's why I have most of my seedlings and like propagation stuff happening over there, because it's going to help them get bigger faster. Whereas these cobs are I think they're 3,500 or 3,000. That's going to help my plants to look as close to habitat as I can get here. Something else to consider is like the seasonal difference that light naturally occurs. Obviously, we know like the winter right now, it's getting dark already, which is not great for us, but that helps to induce dormancy in your plants. So something to think about is, at summer when it's getting dark around like 9:30, 10, and in winter when it's getting dark around 4:30, your plants want that as well. So I use timers so I don't have to think about turning things on and off. So my timers go from like, I don't know, 8 or 9 hours, maybe like 9 hours in the winter time. And then I will progressively make them stay on longer as the growing season approaches, and then do the same thing, shorter, moving into winter. Heat is something that's also very important. I'll get into that a little bit more after, but some people use halogens or incandescent lights to help increase with that, because you're not going to get any heat output pretty much with fluorescent lights, the T5s, and you'll get very little with your cobs or LEDs. So I forgot to mention. So a lot of people are using LED panels now, quantum boards. That helps you really fine tune the amount of different light frequencies. So like UV or infrared or blue or all of those like different things you can pick to fit the exact need of the plants living beneath that. So that's super cool. And a lot of people in the group do that as well. Something that people also, let's say a misconception is your plants can get as much sun as they can take, which in a lot of cases that's true. But if your plants aren't receiving any light until like the middle of the afternoon, which is like what west-facing windows will do, they can get sunburn, especially in August when the sun is crazy. So some people like myself will, maybe move your plants around different times of the year, or put up like a little piece of shade cloth or something to help them not get sunburned, because like us, plants can get sunburned too. So I grow a lot of things from seed. I find that to be like maybe the most gratifying aspect of my interest in plant horticulture. So seedlings will require different intensities of light and different spans of light, and also different heat. So depending upon what you're growing, you'll need to fine tune that. The quantum board and T5s are great for that because they will disperse the light really evenly and further than a cob will. So heating for seedlings and for propagating. So if somebody gives you a cutting of a cactus, or you degraft something and you're trying to grow roots, you want to heat it from the bottom more often than not. And same thing with seedlings. You want to heat them from the bottom to help promote germination and to help promote faster growth. And that's kind of it. I mean, basically, like there are a lot of like fine tuning things or very specific things, but when you are limited to space and light, like we are in New York, you end up generalizing more than maybe you would otherwise, or if you had a greenhouse. So that's it for the most part. The most important thing to remember is like seasonal difference in temperature and light and water, pretty much everything except soil. You're going to want to try to mimic the seasons and parts of the world that your plants live in as much as possible. And things like timers and different lights or different light frequencies will help you do that. Also, sorry, one last thing, drafty windows, another New York problem. You want to try to take care of that as much as possible, because those slight drafts can cause your plants to rot, especially if you're infrequently watering them. Water and cold does not mix well for cactus and succulents. So if you have specific questions about your setup or your needs, hit us up. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Zach, I just want to ask quickly before we go on to the next topic. You mentioned, keeping things looking as close to habitat. And I was thinking, just maybe for someone that might not know what that means, if you could just explain what a habitat plant means, and also what the difference is in making something look like habitat and actually being habitat.
Yeah, okay. I also forgot to mention UV light, which is important for things looking like their habitat. So UV light, that is what sunburns us, right? That is also what keeps your plant compact growing. So exfoliation is something that happens when your plant isn't getting enough light. So if you like walk into a fancy boutique in Soho and they have like this tall Cereus that is like a nice meaty cactus that's looking good, and then it has this crazy offshoot growing like 2 feet off of it, that is because it is in a dark store and it is not getting enough light, and it is definitely not getting UV. So UV is what helps to keep your plant growing as close to habitat as possible in terms of like this like ugly exfoliation. And it also helps the skin of the plant looking as close to habitat as possible, and the spines, which is really important for, it's an important like aesthetic thing when people are buying cactus, I think, is like they have super gnarly spines or super long spines or super fluffy. You're not going to get that if it isn't getting the proper UV. So when I talk about things growing as close to habitat as possible, those plants are not getting pampered. They're not getting somebody watering them or setting a light timer. They're experiencing what their ecosystem is throwing at them. So they're maybe not getting like as much light as they want, or as much sun, or sorry, as much water. So they're going to look maybe like more gnarly, right? Like not as beautiful, or like not as like show perfect, or not as pristine. They're going to have like some scarring, or they're going to have like stunted growth, or they're going to look a little water deprived. So me personally, I really dig that. And I try to mimic that with the amount of light I'm giving my plants and the substrate that they're growing in. So John will talk about that as well, and the amount of water that they're getting. So personally, I try to, mimic that as much as possible, because that's the reason, that's one of the main reasons I fell in love with cactus, is like their ability to evolve to the most inhospitable ecosystems. And yeah, that's what I'm into.
Thanks so much, Zach. Any questions on lighting, you can put it in the Q&A function, and at the end, I will go through and Zach can answer lighting ones, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. Let's go back to this real quick. So next we have soil, and this is going to be John who's going to.
All right. Hey guys. So yeah, soil is not quite as crucial as water and light, but it can kind of set you up for success or failure. So you definitely want to put your plants in the right soil. And the right soil is probably, can you just turn my camera on actually?
Yeah.
One second.
There you go.
Hey everybody. So I made this nice little platter of soil here with all different ingredients, but basically your soil should be kind of an even particle size, and that's kind of what I've found to be the best. It's not, sure, it's important what it is, but it's much more important that it's loose. So that's what people mean by when they say it's fast draining mix. Give cacti and soil cacti and succulents fast draining soil mixes. That's basically what that means. So I'll go through some of these soil ingredients real quick. Some of them are not really used for cactuses, but I feel like you should just know about them because they can be useful for like seedlings or different situations. So first we have perlite. This is very common. It's in every common potting mix. And a lot of like really experienced growers actually will grow in mixes that are like 80% perlite. So it's not some like fancy mysterious particle. You can grow great plants in like 80% perlite. Next door to it, we have just like a normal potting mix. These are called hydrotone balls. It's very popular in hydroponics growing. It's expanded shale, and shale is like a very hard clay rock. Anyways, I put these in cactus and succulent mixes before, and it's pretty nice. These are too big. I've usually cracked them and put them in soil, but breaking up into smaller particles. But anyways, these are, this is pine bark. Pine bark's really great to add to soil. It holds on to beneficial bacteria. Definitely recommend putting that in your mix. This is vermiculite. Wouldn't really recommend using vermiculite in your mixes. It can kind of get mushy, but it does have some uses. This is lava rock. Lava rock can be a nice top dressing. You can also use it to loosen up your soil. Generally would not, pick it as my number one thing to add to soil, but anyways, next is pumice. Pumice is probably the best single ingredient for cactus and succulent mixes. Some people will grow like 100% pumice. Their mixes will be 100% pumice, and they'll grow great plants. Whoops. Okay. Can you guys see me? Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Got you.
So the next door we have Turfis. Turfis is this is what baseball fields are. I don't know what to call it, paved with, or I don't know. But this is all what's called calcine clay, which basically means it's just fired clay particles. This is pretty good. It's not the best, but you can add it to your soils. And maybe just for time, I'll skip this side because they're only for really special situations. Sand, just in my opinion, it's garbage. I would not add it to your soil mixes. And in the middle is granite. Granite is really great for loosening up your mix as well. There's a lot of kind of high-tech experimental growers that will grow in granite mixes, and it's also a nice top dressing. I'm just going to show you, just if that was too much for some of you. This is a very basic mix. This is like your standard mix that you can grow, many plants in. Not 100% of plants will like this, but for the most part, this is like kind of the old school soil mix, what it looks like. And it's basically 50 or 60% perlite or pumice, either or, and 50% or 40 to 50% compost or regular potting soil. And you can grow most anything in that, So if all of this is too complicated, or you don't really want to get experimental on a nice plant you just bought, you can just make that mix. But yeah, how much time do I have left? How long have I been going for? All right, well, I'll show some of my plants real quick.
I think, John, could you touch a little bit on just different soil mixes for different plants and how that can be part of a key
Sure.
to certain species?
Yeah, so sure. What should I talk about? I mean, for the most part, some like African plants, these are all African, these are all euphorbias. These like a little bit more water, so I might make, when I'm making a mix for euphorbias, I might add materials that hold a little bit more water. So something like I might add a little bit more pine bark, which holds a lot of water, or a little bit more turfis. And I'd probably put much less or no granite, because granite just holds basically no water. So that's kind of how I'd vary it. You know, when you get to know about the ingredients more, you kind of know how to balance them out. Most, you know, ideally you would have a soil mix for every single kind of plant, but that's not realistic. So you kind of, you know, for the most part, almost all these plants, no matter, you know, they're from all different parts of the world, but they're pretty much in the same soil mix, which is generally, you know, in my mixes, mostly pumice, pine bark, maybe some turfis and some granite. Sometimes I swap perlite for pumice or pumice for perlite, but I do prefer pumice. Pumice is just superior. And yeah, I got some Dioscorea seedlings here. I'll show you, like, this is a very different mix than those, my mature Dioscoreas here. You know, the mature ones are much looser. So the older the plant, you kind of want a looser mix. If the plant is really young, you want a mix that holds more water. And the last thing I was supposed to talk about was when to repot. And generally you want to repot before the growing season. So like the other guys talked about, you know, the growing season, maybe winter time and maybe summertime. But if you can time it, you know, put it in a new pot right before the it starts to grow, that's ideal. And I think that's it.
Amazing. Beautiful, John. Yeah, I think also just worth noting, like, soil's one place you can really do a lot of trial and error with. John's like a mad scientist about it, and he's always you know, working on something. And I think that you can get by with just, oh, my grow lights just went off. You can get by with pumice and organic only, or you can, you know, get much more complicated. I think it's just worth noting, maybe you don't need like 100 ingredients all the time, which is what you mentioned as well. Anyway, let's so just a reminder, guys, if there's any oh, sorry, there's a message.
I can start hitting people back with the some answers if we're running out of time.
I think it's okay. Let's quickly do pests and then do and then we can do it.
Okay.
So Marco, you are going to come in with a little bit of pest information.
Yeah, so I'll keep this kind of brief because we're running low on time. But when you have a bunch of plants all living in a very confined space, like an apartment, or all on the same shelves or windowsills, pests spread relatively easily. And the most common pests, can you go to my camera? Well done. So some of the most common pests we see are like scale insects, and those kind of look almost like a little, it's like a little brown dot, and they kind of look like a scab on your plant. And they usually secrete a kind of syrupy liquid from them. And another pest that we oftentimes see is spider mites, and those almost build a web-like fiber on your plants, like across the spines if we're talking about cactuses, or on leaves in more succulent plants.
Did we lose Marco?
And they tend to lead to dropping of those plants. And then another one that's really common that you can actually see on this plant, if you can see those little white dots, I don't know if you can, those are mealy bugs. and they oftentimes just live in the crevices of your plant. They're pretty easy to identify because those little white dots. And some ways to treat those pests are, some people prefer more like organic solutions, such as like soapy water or alcohol. You can apply that with a Q-tip or sometimes a soft bristle toothbrush. But I would be careful just because a lot of these cactuses have a farina, which is like that white coating and like a waxy cuticle on them. So you can do that. And there's also neem oil that you can use, and you can either spray that or directly put it on wherever the pests are. But I think the most effective way of treating pests is with something like 3-in-1, which is a pesticide you can buy at like Home Depot or any other like hardware store. And yeah, that's as far as that goes for like treating pests. Another thing that's not technically a pest is rot, which can be caused by various funguses or overwatering or drafts, as Zach talked about. And you can usually clean that out or cut the plant like 2 inches above where the rot is. It's usually easier with columnar cactuses like Trichoceres, and harder with more globular or spherical cactuses. And once you cut that, you're able to put something like sulfur dioxide on it, which is like a powder you can buy at most gardening supply stores or online. And some people use like cinnamon, which is like a natural antiseptic, but I think the sulfur does a far better job, and let that heal over, and then you can repot that back up. So that's just a quick touch on pests. Yeah.
Marco, thank you. So guys, I think what would be cool right now is we can quickly go through a couple of these questions that were typed out in the Q&A, but then also if you have a question or comment, anything like that, put your hand raise function up in the Zoom app or whatever, and we can tag you in so you can talk to us. But let's see at these, what we have in the Q&A right now. Zach already answered a bunch. Okay. Also check the Q&A if you asked a question, because it might have already been answered.
Walter, maybe you could go over some of the questions that were asked, if there's any.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. How often do you need to refresh soil? I think that's a good question. And Joe said, typically every 2 years is the rule of thumb, but more of the crazy growers will keep their plants in the same pots for decades. Joe, and I also agree with this last part, is, he kind of only repots when you see the roots growing through the bottom, and that means it has outgrown its home. Sometimes plants are strong enough where the roots will literally break the pot when they're too big. But yeah,
there's a lot of factors that play into it too. Like you can keep basically what repotting, there's two different sort of issues when you're talking about repotting. One is when a plant has outgrown its container, and the other is when a plant has been in a container so long that it sapped all the nutrients out of the soil. And that can sort of be remedied by fertilizing, which we didn't really touch. I didn't touch too much. I didn't touch at all upon in watering, and is sort of a separate subject that if anyone has questions about, we can cover that in, like, if you want to DM us on Instagram, we can help you out there.
Also, our email it's admin@lescss.org. We're happy to answer things there. I think it's worth noting also that we visited an amazing grower in California who's arguably, I think, one of the best at what he does. And, there was plants that in plastic pots that he had not repotted and, like literally since the 70s, I think. So, I mean, I wouldn't go overboard. That's like my instinct always with that. Let's see.
Like, just super quick, you can always unpot your plant if you're concerned about roots or like root rot or any pests in your roots, and then just put it back in the same thing. Like once you get like a little more advanced in your plant trade, you can trim back the roots, let that dry and callus, and then repot it in the same planter if you're like emotionally or aesthetically tied to that planter.
For sure. Okay, Paul was asking if adding coffee grounds soil will help in any way.
No, I would not do that.
Cool.
I think you can add it if you can, you know, compost it, and then you're using the compost in your soil. That's cool, but yeah, I don't know. That's like it may be, I don't know. I forgot why people.
It makes it more acidic for sure, but
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think in terms
I don't know.
of,
I wouldn't do that though.
I wouldn't do it either. Yeah, I would say stay away from that.
Amy asked a fairly complicated question about her own setup, but Zach, maybe you could answer her personally because it's about hers.
Yeah, I'll hit her back.
Let's see. Thomas says, how do I know when my plant is ready to come out of dormancy and to increase watering? I mean, a lot of times they show you, especially the leafier plants like African stuff will start putting out new leaves. But anyone else have something to add there?
A lot of times too, these plants start growing again when they're given a trigger from the atmosphere. Like when it becomes the rainy season again in a lot of these places, then they're actually getting water, and it wakes the plant up basically and tells it, hey, it's time to start growing. Like, you know, so I think generally rule of thumb, at least for myself personally, I wait until around late March, early April to sort of start a more healthy watering regimen. And you do want to taper up. You don't want to immediately start drenching your plants on, you know, the first day of spring, because that can kind of freak them out. But yeah, I think in general, once you start watering them more and doing it in a gradual way, they'll wake up and they'll start growing.
So Lance asked about seedling care. So I would say once they start getting to like the top of your humidity or close to the top of your humidity cover, you want to start like taking it off for parts of the day. And then as they seem to be getting more hardy or acclimatizing, then you can just remove it fully. And then that's what I do, right? And then I miss them maybe once or twice a day to help with that, with supplementing their ambient humidity for seedlings.
Great. Let's see what else we got here. Amy is asking, when you're doing like a winter sprinkling for summer growers, how often to do it? You know, a little spritz.
It depends.
Sorry, say it one more time.
Amy was asking if you're doing like a, you know, winter sprinkling of water, you know, not a full water for like
Right.
plant, how often?
I think twice a week is generally my rule of thumb. But one thing that I wanted to touch upon in watering that I didn't was really learning how to read your plants and know what they look like when they do need water. And obviously,
No, sorry, keep going.
Obviously a lot of these plants, yeah, they're not going to be growing in the winter, so they're going to start looking a bit dehydrated and not happy, but that's totally normal. And the winter watering is generally, like I said, to keep their root system from completely dehydrating and dying out and becoming brittle and just dying.
I would just say if you don't feel fully comfortable with your plant yet, I would not start jumping into twice a week watering during the winter. I think you'll probably kill it.
And when I say twice a week, it's a taste of water. It's not a full watering at all. But yeah, and that's sort of generally what I do with my very specific setup, knowing that they're under lights and that they are drying out pretty rapidly. So yeah, I would go easy on the winter watering, but don't go the full winter without giving them a little taste of water.
Ditsa was asking about giving succulent or cacti any plant supplements or food, which is, I assume, fertilizers. Joe, if you wanted to just quickly touch on that, because I know you were going to.
Yeah. The only fertilizer I use is called Super Kubuto, and I get it from Cactus Store, which is where we all met. And shout out Cactus Store because they are
friend of the group.
And really, we owe a lot to them in terms of how we all met and why we're doing this. So I would highly suggest using their fertilizer, which you can get online, and I can link you to it. And I don't use it in the winter, obviously, because unless it's a winter grower plant, but I will use it every other watering during the summer. And with this specific fertilizer, there is a ratio printed on the bottle for how much you should add to your water, depending on how big your watering can is.
Michael is asking how he joins the club. He lives in Brooklyn with a small collection of his own. As we were saying before, right now, in general, our meetings are not closed, but it's just we're working on certain projects, but we are starting to open up and do some more public meetings. So Zach, do you have the info on what you were talking about before?
Sorry, for joining the meeting?
For like, if we,
Yeah. So just hit us up on Instagram, Michael, and we'll add you. I'll add you to the meeting calendar, and once it happens, you'll get an invite, and then yeah, we can go from there, and we'll start exchanging ideas, and hopefully we can start meeting and doing some trips and excursions in the future. But there's no there's no cost or anything.
Guys, can we just shout out the email for LESCSS as well for everyone?
You can do admin@lescss.org. And I'm Walt at lescss.org if you need to write me an important private message.
Do we have time to show off some plants? I think Georgiana wants to see more plants, and I think that's just fun for everybody.
I think let's close. Yeah, well, first, real quick, let's just, someone's asking, oh, it's Marco's typing. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's close out with that. Maybe who wants to do that first? We'll show off a little bit more collections. Guys, thank you so much to, obviously the boys that spoke and also everyone that was here to join us and learn and ask questions. And also, of course, Dover Street. I just want to say one more time, if you found this helpful at all or want to learn more about what we're up to and donate to what we're working on, which is a community center project, we would love if you could go to thecenter.lescss.org. And then we also have shirts and plants available at Dover Street Market, New York. The shirts are available online as well, and the plants are in-store only, and all of the proceeds will go to the project.
And the links for places to find these things are in the chat.
Yep. The links are in the chat. Cool, guys. Who wants to show off some plants?
I can go first, real quick. So the next chat will be about this plant, Welwitschia mirabilis. But yeah, this is a great plant that we all have. There's 4 of them here. There's a lot of what's called volunteer plants also in the pot, but it's only these 2 leaves. I'll show you one of my newest plants. This is a South African bulb called, I'll put it against the wall, Bulbine torta. It has these really great, like, curly leaves. These are also South African bulbs, Masonia. They're called Masonias. I forgot the
so cool.
species. Yeah, I just got those. What else is cool? I'll bring something out that most is probably one of my rarest plants, and it's not a cactus. But I guess you could call it a succulent, but it is what's called kind of a caudex. It has what's called a caudex, and this is a Lechinopteris. It's what's called an ant fern. And it's really wild looking. It looks like lava or something.
Oh yeah.
This is another pretty rare one. This is a Dakarya Madagascariensis. It's got these zigzag branches to it, which is pretty cool. And yeah, that's it. I'll let somebody else go.
I can go, I guess.
Anybody else want to go? If not, I'll keep going.
This is this is a plant that people poach regularly because of its beauty. And
Is my
because-
connection bad? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
You're good, John.
Hello?
Zach's gonna keep going.
Okay, good.
So this is a plant that is always poached and has been getting worse and worse over the last several years. So I'm showing this seed grown plant to prove that if grown in the appropriate conditions, so this came from a greenhouse in California, that it can look almost as good as the habitat plants, but this is a Copiapoa columna alba. So with the appropriate UV and all of those conditions, you can still get the incredible spination, and you can start to still develop farina over time, which is what keeps them looking white or pale on their skin. So grow your plants from seed, don't rip them out of the ground. That's it.
I'll show some stuff. People. This is a small little Polycephora,
Yeah.
Trombuliformis. Super cool. Kind of rare. They have these crazy scales on them, or look like scales. These are super cool. And then on the Copiapoa train, I have this seed-grown Copiapoa, Hasseltoniana, and super good. Looks similar. Like came from a greenhouse in California as well.
Marco, how old do you think it is? Georgina's asking.
The Copiapoa.
Yeah.
No clue, but I'd say somewhere around like 15 years old, somewhere around there. Yeah. Have a really old Monte Cana Medicinorium that has this crazy form to it. Kind of looks like it's melting. Super cool. Yeah. That's all.
I'll show one thing real quick. This is a very special Astrophytum that I got, actually grown from seed here in New York, in Long Island, rather. It's an Astrophytum Ornatum, and it's a variegated one. I haven't had it for very long. I actually just got it recently, but it was grown by a friend of the group who lives out on Long Island. And yeah, just a beautiful, really old specimen with some crazy nodding, and it's just gnarly. And hopefully I'll give it a good life here in my apartment. Other than that, nothing really too crazy. I got this variegated, why can't I think of the name?
Philmania.
Ubomania.
Yeah, Ubomania pectinifera, that I got from another friend of the group who got it from a grower in Texas. And I mean, they're hard to come by anyways. I have another one that's grafted, that I got in Arizona. Or no, I also got this in California. But this guy is just maybe one of my prized possessions of my collection. That's kind of it for me. And maybe it for the talk.
I think that's a wrap, guys. Thank you.
Oh,
all.
wait. So we had, oh no, Tom, never mind, sorry.
Guys, please come to the next two talks. They're going to be really cool. And yeah, I think that's about it. Again, email us, DM us, whatever, if you want to get in touch. And please donate and buy our shirts.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome.
Thanks everyone so much.
Thanks, bye. Thanks
Thank
all
you.
for coming.
Rocking, guys.
Awesome. Talk to y'all soon. Bye, Chunk.
Later.
Bye.